Hello everyone, welcome to my Separate Ways Remilk, Professional Difficulty, no damage, no new game plus items, no charms, S+, Worstthrough. This will cover the entirety of this fake DLC, and I'm calling it a fake DLC because of how much it's a complete rip-off of a DLC. It has no interesting scenarios. The way it uses the new areas is trash. The boss fights are utter garbage. Everything else with the story, the characters, everything like that is terrible. I've already showcased this in my blind playthrough. It's an absolute mockery of Resident Evil 4, an absolute mockery of Ada's character, an absolute mockery of the Separate Ways DLC. And so many more things, but I need to lay out all these points properly in my retrospective that I will be doing, because I need to do it, assuming that school and other dumb things in my life don't get in the way of the retrospective. So stay tuned for that, but we have just done that really boring fight. That's just a damage race, the epitome of good game design right there. A damage race for an actual encounter. Wow. What awe-inspiring boss design, guys. I mean, yes, it might be better than the other bosses in this pre-alpha, but that's the best they've got. Just damage racing that guy, because not doing so just puts you at risk of being hit by those really stupid hallucinations, and I don't even understand how a hallucination can damage you. Why is it that when you deflect hallucinations, they drain your knife durability? How exactly does this move work? Why do the Plagas have this fantastical capability now? It just makes no sense, and it's just a complete lack of understanding as to how the real world works in New Capcom's eyes, how the Plaga works in New Capcom's eyes. What the hell were they thinking? It just doesn't make any sense, guys, at all. And I cannot wait for the people to say that this so-called pre-alpha of a Resident Evil title is canon. In what way can you consider anything that happens in Resident Evil 4 Remilk canon? Just answer me that question right now. And as a matter of fact, just mentioning that topic, I heard that people like Under the Mayo have been praising this DLC, and I heard that Under the Mayo put out a video praising this DLC as well. So, I can only imagine what he's likely laid out in that video, but I'm assuming every single point is just indicative of someone who has no understanding of Resident Evil designs, no understanding as to what entails a good Resident Evil story, no understanding of the characters whatsoever. He's just going to completely excuse all the really poor moments with the voice acting, all the moments with the story being absolutely nonsensical, all the crappy boss designs, all the poor hitboxes, everything like that. And there's so much more I haven't talked about just yet, but all in all, I expect this video to be absolute garbage, but I'm not going to watch it because I'd rather not have my mind be poisoned by his stupidity. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. And at the moment, I can't think of any other tangents to go on, so I'll just talk about what's happening in this Worstthrough. So, just like in my first Worstthrough, I skipped the first two crossbow guys, get rid of the third one, and then snipe that guy, and now I'm going to lure these enemies back over here. I saw that Master KD has started posting content of Separate Ways Remilk, and I actually took some cues from his Worstthrough that he did of Separate Ways Remilk. So there are a couple of differences you're going to see in this video. So I'm going to approach Pesanta 2 differently. Originally, I would use the upgraded TMP against her, but Master KD had actually used the upgraded sniper rifle, and he sold his pistol and his TMP to gain a lot of money. And when you have the sniper rifle leveled up to level 4 in the power statistic, you'll be able to deal a lot more damage to Pesanta. It's just trying to aim for the head is a bit awkward with the scope, and in general, the jarring transition from the over-the-shoulder perspective to the first-person view with the sniper rifle is just very, very weird. I don't know why they decided to opt for that rather than something else. But just trying to adjust to that transition to make sure that you don't miss Pesanta's head can be pretty awkward. But when you get this in your head, you're going to be able to hit Pesanta in the head. And you're going to see a lot of really dumb moments with the AI because the hallucinations act really stupid and start just walking around and doing all sorts of dumb things. But I'll talk more about that when I get to that part of the video. Right now we have this guy, so I'm just going to take him out with the pistol. Yeah, once again, the pistol is a very worthless tool. At least in Separate Ways OG, the pistol wasn't useless because the Blacktail was amazing. But in the Remilk, the Blacktail might as well be on par with that of a pea shooter because it does absolutely no damage to the enemies. It has really bad hit stun on the enemies for some stupid reason. Just sell it. The TMP more than suffices as being the substitute to the pistol. We've gotten past those guys, and now we're going to do the stealth section, which works exactly the same as in my previous Worstthrough. So we're going to pick up the kitchen knife in the next area and use it to get rid of a certain number of enemies. So we get rid of this guy, we're going to pick up the supplies inside this house, and we're going to get rid of the female ganado outside, and then use the sniper rifle to dispatch both of these enemies at the same time. And then the enemies will come through the door. I'm going to use the barrel to get rid of them, and the last guy, I'll use this barrel right over here. I'm going to pick up the supplies, and I'm going to showcase some additional loot that I didn't collect in my previous Worstthrough. So there are a couple of additional locations for flash grenades that I didn't actually spot in my previous Worstthrough, and I have Ether to thank for actually showcasing these locations in his Worstthrough. But coming up, when we get to the platform section, there are two crows. One of them has handgun ammo, and the other one has a flash grenade. So I don't know why this is the case. I mean, I know in like Resident Evil 4 OG there were crows that had loot inside them, but given how badly balanced this entire DLC is, every single piece of loot matters, and to hide it inside of a gamey crow is just really stupid. At least in Resident Evil 4 OG, the crows didn't feel so forced upon you to actually get their loot. But this one, they really do. But there's the flash grenade. I killed that guy as well. I don't know where all the blue medallions are in this part, but I don't go for all the merchant requests because I don't really see the need to do so. I'm going to get past these guys, going to pick up the loot inside of this church right over here, and we're going to take on Pisanta in a moment. So, like I already mentioned, I'm going to use the sniper rifle against Pisanta, and I can totally understand now why Ether and Master KD use the sniper rifle against Pisanta, because it does quite a lot of damage, and that's just something you gotta realize. This just shows how much this DLC is designed around the merchant. The difference in your damage output from not using the merchant to using the merchant is staggering. And honestly, that difference feels more staggering compared to the main experience. I mean, I don't understand why they would design it like it's a microtransaction-based system. If the merchant is that crucial to your fundamental flow of gameplay, why do you make him an optional feature? I don't understand. I mean, instead of having me slot into all these like really stupid upgrades, you could easily just scale the damage up to your baseline, and we'd be getting the same fight. That's just how stupid the merchant is in this stupid pre-alpha. But here comes Pisanta, so I'm going to aim for the head. She does the grab. I'm going to move away at the right moment. And see that? 4 shots to the head, and I'm going to be able to take her out in this first phase. Now we're on the second phase, and like I said, there are just some really dumb AI moments with the hallucinations coming up, as well as with Pisanta, and all the awkward moments that can occur when you're trying to play this encounter normally. That's how badly designed this entire encounter is. There's Pisanta, so if I had gotten far enough away after she teleported, I would have gotten her to do the QTE move. But there's the parry. I'm going to use the sniper rifle to hit her in the head. This is where the AI is acting stupid. So look, that hallucination is just standing there. Pisanta's going to push me into a wall now. Like, if Ada gets pushed into the wall in such a way that she ends up floating in the air, she'll drop down, and she won't be able to parry. And this guy's just walking into me for some weird reason. Look at this. Look how stupid the AI is. How can you tell me that this is somehow a serviceable encounter when their AI systems are this stupid? I mean, seriously, like, I can't rationalize this being the normal way to approach the sequence when it's going to lead to stupid stuff like that. And now we have 2 more hallucinations in the mix. We're on the final phase. So again, parrying the hallucinations for some stupid reason drains your knife durability, and when you parry them, they go away for about 5 seconds to give you an opening to hit Pisanta when she does her attacks. There's the close range attack, so I'm just going to run away. There's the parry, and I need to get out of this spot right here, because if I get pushed up against that wall in an awkward way, I'm not going to nail the parry properly. Here comes Pisanta again. I'm going to use the hook shot. She gets stunned, and now I'm going to use the knife execution. Once again, do not do the hook shot. If you do the hook shot into the knife execution, you'll drain your knife durability for some stupid reason. I don't know how New Capcom could be that clueless that they could miss something as obvious as that. But I guess that shouldn't surprise me, given that they are the most incompetent development team on the planet. And also, I should probably talk about S+. So, S+ on this pre-alpha, you have to beat it in under 2.5 hours using no more than 10 saves. 10 saves is pretty generous in the grand scheme of things, but I really don't care if it's generous or not. S+ is not representative of the gameplay experience overall, because you're just running through it as fast as possible, completely ignoring a lot of the poor designs at play, because that's how little new Capcom use Resident Evil. They just view it as some content to run through over and over again, and just ignore everything else. That's why the story quality is bad, that's why the character quality is bad, that's why the gameplay quality is bad, because it's all designed for speedrunning and the like. That just led to their very lax nature with this entire pre-alpha. Everything is just so terrible in this DLC. And even going through it with upgrades now, nothing changes how hollow and soulless everything feels with this stupid pre-alpha. This does not have the heart and soul of the original Separate Ways DLC. Separate Ways OG was a fun and frenetic experience. Yes, you could get it done very quickly, but it felt like there was still content right there. It felt like going through it very quickly had a lot of weight behind it. There was a lot of substance to that whole process. There is just no substance here with the length that they've chosen. They don't even care about making this a very fun and frenetic experience because everything just feels so sluggish. Everything just feels so bizarre with the choice of pacing. I mean, come on. Like, in the final encounter, when you have to get that rocket launcher to Leon, it still feels like a very slow sequence where you can just take your time and just wait out the encounter a bit, just to make sure you're not getting screwed by other dumb designs, when they can't even instill a sense of urgency for the right reasons. That just shows how little they understood the original Separate Ways content. And I don't even know if Shinji Mikami has reacted to this, but I expect his reaction to be positive. But you can't really trust a developer's reaction to another developer's product to be genuine because, of course, professional courtesy would dictate that they have to be polite at all times, even if they don't like the product. Because obviously, if they're mean to other developers, that puts a lot of heat on them. So you can't extract anything from a developer's reaction to another developer's product because of that professional courtesy standard. We're just dealing with enemies. We got the blast crossbow, so we're just gonna dispatch these enemies right over here. There's little need to deal with the chainsaw guys and get their treasure. The treasure you already get is more than sufficient enough. And I can't imagine why new Capcom would think that just going back for all the treasures somehow entails replayability. This DLC has no replayability whatsoever. And the only reason I can even bear any sense of boredom with going through Resident Evil 4 Remilk and Separate Ways Remilk when I'm doing content creation and just recording videos is because when I do that, I automatically turn off that part of my mind. As long as I realize that I'm recording content, I'm able to just excuse a lot of the boredom I already feel towards Resident Evil 4 Remilk and Separate Ways Remilk. That's why I'm able to go through this DLC multiple times, so long as I'm actually recording for future content. And I still need to do that poor designs of Separate Ways Remilk content because it desperately needs it. The amount of awkward gameplay, the amount of poor designs. I came across poor designs in this part. Like, I'm going to be able to use the rocket launcher in this particular video. I used the rocket launcher against U3 Phase 1 and Sadler. But U3 Phase 2 with that stupid worm slash centipede slash giant plaga slash whatever the hell that thing is, that BOW, if it even is its own BOW, I came across a lot of poor designs and I had to restart that encounter so many times. Not so many times, not as much as what it was like doing my worst through of Separate Ways Remilk the first time. But I still saved some poor designs from that stupid encounter because of how badly designed it is. And even Ether has complained about bad designs with that stupid worm. And it's good that he's actually seeing the same problems. We get past this enemy right over here. We're going to deal with the El Gigante in a fake encounter because, again, this fight feels so unfinished. And at least with the damage upgrades, I can speed this encounter up. So I got it done in about 4 minutes, or was it 2 minutes? I think it was 2 minutes, actually. But I've sped it up to like 40 seconds because there's absolutely nothing that I'm doing that it puts me at risk of being hit by the enemies. I'm just staying on top of a rooftop, using my grenades to keep the El Gigante still so that I can hit its parasite with the sniper rifle. I'm also going to be using the blast crossbow against the El Gigante because the blast crossbow doesn't really have a lot of utility aside from a couple of minor encounters later on. Because, you know, like, your explosives don't really matter much. You already have grenades, you have flash grenades. You're going to be using the rocket launcher against U3 Phase 1 and Sadler, so it really doesn't matter so much. But I knocked that guy down. I first exposed his parasite using the sniper rifle. 4 shots to the head with the sniper rifle at max damage. is what allows you to expose the parasite. Now I'm going to use explosives to slow this guy down so that I can hit the parasite on his back. And I missed the QTE, but I'd rather not go through the QTE sequence again because there's no point. I might put myself at risk of being hit by the enemies. But now that I'm down, I'm just going to climb up onto this rooftop. Be careful of the enemies with the axes. You need to make sure you put yourself in the right position where you won't get hit by the axes. And also be very careful when you're trying to climb onto the rooftops. Even when this El Gigante is nowhere near me, the detection on this grab is horrendous. He can grab you with like nuclear range, and I have footage of this. And as much as the grab doesn't do instant damage and you can break out of it using your knife execution, it's still a really shitty hitbox either way. It really doesn't make any sense to me how that grab doesn't deal instant damage, yet when a regular enemy grabs onto you, or even like a Navistador or every other enemy, they just deal instant damage to you. And the only other exception where you don't take instant damage when you get grabbed is when you deflect Krauser's grab. And that is a different exception because that's tied to a deflection, but this is completely different. It's a grab animation tied to range. How close you are to the El Gigante, even though it's been badly calculated because that guy can grab you from like across the map, it feels like, or like when you're halfway across the map. I don't understand why that hitbox is so bad, but why does it not do instant damage? Like, again, there are some really strange moments with the programming in this pre-alpha, which is all indicative of a different team handling this pre-alpha. I mean, it really does feel like it. Like, it feels like a fourth team handled this pre-alpha. And as I've already discussed before, with Resident Evil 4 Remilk's really odd development, they had one team work on the village area, they had another team work on the castle area, and they had another team working on the island area, and it totally feels like this is a different team. And I just find that very odd how Resident Evil Village's development stalled for about a month because of COVID, yet somehow Resident Evil Village is of a better state gameplay-wise compared to Resident Evil 4 Remilk, which theoretically didn't have any kind of stifled development. But apparently, even without a stifled development, New Capcom somehow made a Resident Evil title of such pitiful quality that is so far below the baseline level of incompetency. You can't even say it's an amateurish team developing Resident Evil 4 Remilk at that point. It doesn't make any sense, guys. I don't understand how game development works, and even though I am doing a master's degree in gaming, data analytics, and entertainment, I still haven't gotten to that point where I can rationalize how that kind of game development works. I'm not even focusing on that aspect of game development. I'm focusing more so on the business intelligence side, the data analytics side, all that kind of stuff. But I think even with that kind of understanding, I would not be able to rationalize as why the game development for Resident Evil 4 Remilk was this compromised. It really doesn't make any sense. But we're now doing the Armadura section, so I get rid of those two guys, and I use a flash grenade on them. I'm then going to stun this guy and use the knife execution on him. There's a really weird glitch that can occur where if you do not finish off the Armadura with the knife execution and it just survives, if you then finish it off with a couple of bullets, it will teleport you back into the knife execution and it will finish him off. It's very weird. I don't know why this kind of bug exists, but it's clear it's not intended for the Armadura to survive a knife execution, which is why that kind of bug occurs. So I don't know why there are those situations where you do the knife execution on the Armadura and it just survives. And I originally said that if you use your combat knife, you'll always get the kill, but that's not actually true. So just make sure you damage the parasite a bit before you actually do the knife execution. But the sequence is done now, and now we just need to get past these crossbow guys. So I'm just going to get rid of this crossbow guy right here when she stops firing. I'm going to do the knife execution because I got a lot of moments where the suplexes didn't register properly. And I keep calling it a suplex. I don't know what the name of the kick is that Ada does when she's finishing off enemies from behind, but I just call it a suplex just to describe a melee attack from behind. But the amount of times I got screwed by bad detection is pretty annoying. So, yeah, just another example of a downgrade from Resident Evil 5 where the suplex detection was really good. And I've been thinking of doing a series like that where I title it, Look at the Downgrade Here, and I just showcase moments from Resident Evil 4 and 5 that are amazing, and then compare it to Resident Evil 4 Remilk with the same kind of mechanics and mentalities, and it's just not good whatsoever. I've really thought of doing that, so that's definitely another project to add onto the agenda. But as of right now, I did say in a community post that I wanted to go back and do a playthrough of Resident Evil 2 Remilk and Resident Evil 3 Remilk, just because at the time when I recorded my blind playthroughs of Resident Evil 2 Remilk and Resident Evil 3 Remilk, I was still very inexperienced with commentating, and I did not really understand how to lay out the objective problems with the Resident Evil series at that point in time. I didn't really know where I was with ranking the series, or with actually judging the series. So that's why I need to do another playthrough to really fix those kind of issues. And another problem with those blind playthroughs was technical issues, because the PS4 at the time was just not very good at capturing video footage of high quality games, because there would be moments with the video footage where the video would just get these cuts and it would just transition to another part of the video. Whereas, like, the cuts you see in my videos, I'm actually doing those. I'm putting in those cuts to streamline the video and make it a lot more bearable to watch. But on PS4, when I was recording Resident Evil 2 Remilk and Resident Evil 3 Remilk, there would be moments where the video footage would just cut out. And this also occurred with Resident Evil 7 as well. So, yeah, the RE engine just did not gel well with the technological limitations of PS4, but at least the PS5 does not have the same kind of issues with its video footage. I mean, I have come across issues with the capture system on PS5. Like, for instance, for some reason, I had a random moment with my capture gallery during the time when I was recording Worstthroughs for Resident Evil 2 Remilk, where I would get corrupted video footage for some bizarre reason, and I would not be able to record them, and there would just be segments of the video that would be frozen. But that's the only technical issue I came across, and then I reset my PS5, and I didn't come across those issues again. And I have come across similar issues on Share Factory recently, but they're just visual bugs, and they normally rectify themselves, and they haven't occurred frequently, which is good. So overall, the video capture system on PS5 has been a pretty pleasant experience for me, and that's precisely why I need to do those playthroughs of Resident Evil 2 Remilk and 3 Remilk again, because of the technical issues that were already apparent during the blind playthroughs of those particular Resident Evil titles. But it'll be very interesting to go back to Resident Evil 2 Remilk and 3 Remilk. I mean, having to put up with the shit that is Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and this is easily the worst Resident Evil title ever made, the worst remake of a game I've ever played, and the worst game I've ever played in my entire life. I'll probably be approaching Resident Evil 2 Remilk and 3 Remilk from a different perspective. But I will say, though, I was playing through Resident Evil 2 Remilk the other day. This was like a couple of weeks ago, because I was originally intending on doing like a knife-only Worstthrough again, because I wanted to update my previous Worstthroughs and also update my commentary as well, thanks to the new knowledge I've gotten from Resident Evil 4 Remilk. But I gave up in the end, because I was just pretty bored. Like, Resident Evil 2 Remilk is just a very boring game. I mean, it's more so of a game than Resident Evil 4 Remilk, that's for sure, but everything just becomes so repetitive. Everything really feels like it's a step process, and you just got to keep restarting until you achieve the step process in each of the individual segments of Resident Evil 2 Remilk, and it becomes far too formulaic that it's just not worth going back to. And the fact that Resident Evil 2 Remilk is so simplistically designed that knife-only is possible, and it just feels like the intended way that the developers want you to approach Resident Evil 2 Remilk rather than use any of the guns. That's yet again another example of Resident Evil 2 Remilk being very hollow. Add that to the character portrayals being bad, and then the story issues being bad. I mean, the story, you can't even say there's, like, lore issues with Resident Evil 2 Remilk, because honestly, like, the story doesn't really seem that different. It's just the screenplay and the character portrayals that are actually bad in Resident Evil 2 Remilk. I don't really know how much of the lore Resident Evil 2 Remilk violates. I don't know how much of the lore Resident Evil 3 Remilk violates, but I know, you know, certain BOWs, like the Paleheads, didn't exist in Resident Evil 3 OG, and Nikolai is just a bad character, and they did Nemesis so poorly in Resident Evil 3 Remilk. And then the Any-Alpha Parasites in Resident Evil 3 Remilk. I remember some spokesperson for Project Resistance, they decided to say that the Any-Alpha Parasite is related to the Plagas for some reason, which makes absolutely no sense. And it just feels like a massive violation of the lore, and there's no evidence that Umbrella had a presence in Resident Evil 4 OG, and they don't even touch upon that supposed link in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. There's no link back to Umbrella aside from Luis being a member of Umbrella, which goes absolutely nowhere. Luis being involved with Umbrella changes absolutely nothing with the story of Resident Evil 4 Remilk, so why they did it, I have no idea. But there's no evidence that Umbrella used the Las Plagas to create the Anti-Alpha parasites in Resident Evil 3 Remilk. So why did that spokesperson for Project Resistance make mention to that? That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, that just goes to show how clueless the developers were with the storytelling, and it's honestly the best analogy I can give to how clueless the developers were with actually comprehending the story in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. But enough about that. We have this encounter with U3 right now. I just did the Garrador encounter. The sniper rifle is pretty strong against them, and I also had a couple of flash grenades to slow the enemies down and damage the exposed parasites on the Garradors. So that encounter was pretty simple, but I still made a save because of how awkward the Garrador's AI can be. And I think I did encounter issues, or did I get it on my first try? I don't remember. But now I've just used the rocket launcher on U3 Phase 1 because of how stupid the entire encounter is. And now we have Phase 2 of U3, which is just a stupid worm encounter that I'm guessing was meant to be New Capcom's apology for not putting in the Gravedigger into Resident Evil 3 Remilk. Because why else would this encounter exist? And I get that in Resident Evil 4 OG, you could kill the main body and then the actual parasite would attack you, and it was dragging the main body along, and this boss is doing the same thing as well, where this other BOW or whatever the hell it is pulling the main body along, but somehow it's able to go down into the ground, so it's kind of treating it like it's its own entity, and the body is just completely forgotten about. Like, I don't understand. Like, this just feels way too ridiculous and too extreme for this kind of mutation, and you know, it links back to a issue that just plagues Resident Evil 4 Remilk, which is just how extreme the mutations are. Like, this doesn't feel like the original Plaga. The mutations in Resident Evil 4 OG made sense with complementing the idea that this was the original Plaga because the mutations were very rudimentary. And then in Resident Evil 5, because of the fact that black market dealers and organizations like Tricell, which Wesker took control of at the time, like the fact that they were doing research on the Plaga and expanding upon its capabilities, that's why the mutations were pretty extreme in Resident Evil 5, but not to this extreme of a degree like in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, where they could honestly pass off as entities in a fantasy game. At least Resident Evil 5's mutations actually felt grounded and actually had a bit more sense to how they were presented. But with everything shown in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, it really doesn't make any sense. It totally feels like the developers, before they actually made Resident Evil 4 Remilk, they only played Resident Evil 5 OG, and then they assumed the mutations in Resident Evil 5 were exactly how the mutations were in Resident Evil 4 OG, but that is not true. You have to be an idiot to assume that Resident Evil 4 OG's mutations were anything like Resident Evil 5 OG's mutations. But getting back on track, it's almost like the developers looked at Resident Evil 5 OG's mutations, and then for some bizarre reason, they decided to combine elements of the mutamycete with the hallucinogenic aspects provided by the mutamycete, because of course it's a fungal vector, and fungi can induce hallucinations in individuals. Like, they took Resident Evil 5's mutations, and then combined elements from Resident Evil 7 and Village's mutations, and that became the Plaga that we're seeing right now in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and it doesn't make any fucking sense at all. And coincidentally, the complete lack of thought put into the mutations in Resident Evil 4 Remilk bled into the gameplay as well, because the gameplay for all of the bosses in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, as well as with all of the encounters, all the stupid gameplay mechanics that are just so badly thought out, everything like that, it's all so far below the baseline level of incompetency. And talking about this particular fight, there are times where you saw that acid move for a bit, but there are times where the worm can fire the pustules at you at close range. There are times when it can hit you without even touching you. There are times where you can be behind him when he does a frontal attack, and you'll get hit for no reason. And then you have the Navisidors just drawing your attention away, and I tried to use flash grenades in order to stun them so that I could floor them and actually deal with them quickly before the Gravedigger... I'm sorry, now I'm saying the Gravedigger. That's how confused I am with this, because it really does feel like a Gravedigger rather than a Plaga mutation. But as I was saying, I used the flash grenade to knock out the Navisidors and then finish him off before the worm comes out of the ground and attacks me. But he can come out of the ground very quickly after that summoning move randomly, so oftentimes you don't have a lot of time to deal with this guy before getting rid of the last Navisidor, and it only adds to how awkward the entire encounter with this worm is. And that same level of awkwardness was also apparent during the first phase with U3. Like, that is such a badly done encounter, and I honestly consider U3 to be the worst boss in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And then alongside this, maybe Sadler could take the cake as well. Sadler in Separate Ways Remilk is terrible. Honestly worse than how he is in the main experience. Like, Krauser in Resident Evil 4 Remilk might be the most disgraceful boss fight ever in the entire Resident Evil series. But U3 or Sadler are the worst bosses in the entire Resident Evil series, honestly. I would really say that. Like, they're worse than any boss in Resident Evil 0, and they're worse than Alexia from Resident Evil Code Veronica with her final form. They're worse than Ouroboros Picono from Resident Evil 5 and Excella from Resident Evil 5. They're worse than the Nemesis encounters in Resident Evil 3 Remilk and also in Resident Evil 3 OG. And Nemesis was already quite bad enough as he was in Resident Evil 3 OG because of the fact that they didn't playtest a lot of the mechanics properly against Nemesis. And so you had to use exploits against him a lot. Although Ether has demonstrated that you don't have to use exploits, you can just damage race him with like freeze rounds. And even still though, the final boss of Resident Evil 3 OG was pretty bad. And so was the final boss in Resident Evil 3 Remilk, but I don't consider them to be as bad as U3 or Sadler in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And U3 and Sadler are worse than Moreau from Resident Evil Village, that's for sure, although that's not really saying much because every single boss in Resident Evil 4 Remilk is worse than Moreau. Like, there isn't a single good boss fight in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, but U3 and Sadler really take the cake for being the abject failures in boss designs that they are. Like, that is just my stance on the issue right there. Nothing's going to change that for a while. Even going back to other Resident Evil titles, if I come across a bad encounter, I'm still going to say that U3 and Sadler are worse. And that will be my stance on the matter for a while, unless somehow Resident Evil 5 Remilk ends up being worse than Resident Evil 4 Remilk, which most undoubtedly it will be, because ever since Resident Evil 2 Remilk, the Resident Evil games have just been getting progressively worse, and the only exception to this was Resident Evil Village, and I liked it more than Resident Evil 2 Remilk and 3 Remilk, but Resident Evil 4 Remilk is at such a low quality. It's of a new kind of incompetency, like I've already explained, and Resident Evil 5 Remilk is most likely going to follow that trend. If new Capcom struggled so much with handling a product of this scale, and, you know, like Resident Evil 4 OG is of a lesser scale than Resident Evil 5 OG, and they want to match that when they do release Resident Evil 5 Remilk, can you imagine what a disaster Resident Evil 5 Remilk will be? It won't be surprising at all if Resident Evil 5 Remilk releases and it's of a worser state than Resident Evil 4 Remilk. Because I honestly think new Capcom is out of their depth at this point. They just don't know how to do game design anymore. They don't know how to do Resident Evil anymore. If Resident Evil 4 Remilk is any indication of the standard that they're now adhering to, and all of the signs that I've listed just seem to be pointing in that direction towards pitiful quality, then Resident Evil 5 Remilk is going to be a horrible reimagining of Resident Evil 5. And I know for sure that they're developing Resident Evil 5 Remilk because why else would Wesker say at the end of Separate Ways Remilk, soon the sun will set on the age of man? And obviously they're really trying to set up Wesker and his Ouroboros project, even though it doesn't even make any sense for Wesker to be talking about Ouroboros right now because he only started development of Ouroboros and started maintaining the belief that he has the right to become a god after he killed Spencer in 2006. So why is it that in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, Wesker is portrayed as feeling like he has the right to become a god, and also that he seems to be developing Ouroboros right now? Like, how can he even develop Ouroboros without Jill? Because he needs the antibodies from Jill because she was previously infected by the T-virus to strengthen the virus entirely. And Ouroboros is based on the progenitor virus. It doesn't require the Amber, it doesn't require Las Plagas, it doesn't require all these other vectors that we've dealt with. Ouroboros is literally an offshoot of the progenitor virus. So everything I'm listing right now indicates that Wesker should not be feeling the way he's feeling right now in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And if these developers actually played Resident Evil 4 OG and Resident Evil 5 OG, they would have understood this character moment with Wesker, but apparently they forgot about it. And that's why Wesker is the way he is. And Wesker is already so badly done as a character, and his presence within this DLC doesn't make any sense as well. How does he even have the time to go out and obtain the Amber? And he's so infuriated with Ada and her poor performance, yet at the end of the DLC, he still goes ahead and explains his plans. So he's an idiot for doing that, and also he's supposed to have his superhuman capabilities, right? Because he's infected by the progenitor virus, and I believe in Resident Evil 1 Remilk, when the Tyrant impaled Wesker, it activated his latent abilities, similar to what it's like with the regular zombies, where you incapacitate them and they turn into Crimson Heads. It was something like that with Wesker, and that's how he was able to gain access to his superhuman abilities, and this was indicated in Umbrella Chronicles. But he has these capabilities, yet he doesn't go out of his way to do the mission himself. He could so easily obtain the Amber sample and deal with all the BOWs, and also, apparently, he was involved with the bombing of the island, he was setting those bombs, that's why he was there, yet that completely reduces Ada's role and just makes her seem more incompetent. I could understand Ada in Resident Evil 4 OG planting those bombs, and this wasn't portrayed in Separate Ways OG for some reason, but I guess they didn't want you to waste time with that. But having Ada be the one to plant the bomb showcases that she was planning ahead. It shows her cleverness. But then they just remove all of that and give it to Wesker in this DLC for some reason. And how does Wesker even have the time to go out into the field like this? He has his hand over the entire BOW arms race. He has groups like his HCF team handling the connections right now because they're working on developing the E-Series Butamycete. And is this Amber sample really that important that Wesker needs to go out into the field himself? If he was already going to go out into the field himself, why would he send Ada then? Or even try to contact Lewis? Did he even know about this Amber sample before Lewis contacted them? I would assume he did because of the fact that he seems to understand just how powerful the Amber is. But he already has his Ouroboros virus being developed at this point, if that's what they're trying to go for with Resident Evil 4 Remilk. I mean, there's just no logic to having Wesker appear physically in the field, and I just feel like they did it for cheap fan service more than anything. It just goes to show how much they are willing to compromise their story integrity and not even respect Resident Evil as a universe, or even respect what they've already built in the previous Resident Evil titles. It's just so bizarre what they've done with Wesker, and that plus his poor voice acting. His voice acting is so bad in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and the voice actor himself just isn't good for playing a character as tactically efficient as Wesker. I mean, what were they thinking? And when he's saying dumb quotes like, "Don't come crying to me if you get bit," among other dumb quotes that I've already pointed out in my blind playthroughs of Resident Evil 4 Remilk and Separate Ways Remilk, it just only makes Wesker look more stupid. And you know another thing I just realized? Was Wesker even around during Chapter 1 of Separate Ways Remilk? I mean, he seemed pretty confident in Ada, because he was telling her to stick to the high ground because she has the means. And then at some point between Chapters 1 and 3, Wesker decides, oh, Ada's not that good, so I'm going to go out into the field myself. What prompted him to do so? And it just seemed like that occurred over the span of a few hours. We factor in the time of day Chapters 1, 2, and 3 occurred. That just doesn't make any sense. Just the way they handled Wesker in Separate Ways Remilk is so badly done. And I cannot believe there are people out there who think that this DLC handles the characters nicely. Oh, they actually go through some kind of growth. Are they that oblivious to how dumb these characters are? I mean, they literally start off this DLC with Ada and Luis dancing with each other. Yeah, Wesker saying his stupid quotes. You have him coming out of nowhere, and he's constantly chastising Ada and her crappy performance before he decides to reveal his plan to Ada. You have Ada flip-flopping with her emotions and saying dumb quotes as well, and also the voice actor for Ada is not good at all, and she really exaggerates on Ada's apathetic nature, and just the level of monotone provided by Ada's voice, it just doesn't feel human whatsoever. What were they thinking with that? It just sounds so bad. It's like when Ada says, "Here, catch." That's what I'm talking about. That sounds like a robot talking. It's terrible. And also, Ada just acts really cold in this DLC, and it's like she has no kind of feelings for Leon whatsoever. She's never met him, and she's not really, voicing if Leon is under threat or he's in danger. Doesn't she know that Leon's infected by the Plaga? And they also do nothing with Ada being infected by the Plaga whatsoever. And Ada's infection is so different to Leon's infection for some reason. And she's able to get her own Plaga out by just killing Basanta, which doesn't make any sense, but I'm guessing it's related to the hive mind and or whatever they said about the specialized cells. But why doesn't Sadler use that to his advantage? Why doesn't he call out to Ada in the hive mind or try to take control of her? Like, I don't understand. It makes no sense. The story integrity is so terrible, and these characters do not undergo any kind of growth whatsoever. And all Separate Ways Remilk has done is introduced very absurd scenarios that are meant to be taking place during the normal scenarios of Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and it just adds more confusion and silliness into the mix. As I've already pointed out in my blind playthrough, like, it's so bad. And if this is how the characters are gonna be like in Resident Evil 5 Remilk, they're gonna ruin so many moments from Resident Evil 5 OG. They're gonna ruin Chris Redfield, they'll ruin Sheva, they'll ruin Wesker, they'll ruin Jill. And it would not surprise me in the slightest if all this came true, because new Capcom is so predictable at this point. Like, even before Resident Evil 4 Remilk released, everything I was saying about the gameplay, the story, the characters, every prediction I made came true with Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And the ones that didn't come true were actually exaggerated upon even further by what they've done with the Plaga and the story. And is there even a story in this so-called pre-alpha? I mean, I just don't understand what they were trying to accomplish with Resident Evil 4 Remilk or Separate Ways Remilk. Like, the story just feels so isolated from everything else in the Resident Evil timeline. And that isolated nature probably gave new Capcom incentive to make a lot of the scenarios very ridiculous and make absolutely no sense. But then they want to tie all this to Resident Evil 5 Remilk. And what were they thinking? Can you imagine how silly Resident Evil 5 Remilk will be? Where the main characters will just be telling jokes and acting so out of character, or doing really dumb things and dumb actions. Or you have, like, the BOWs just being so fantastical in their interpretation. You have Wesker just saying all sorts of cheesy lines, and then his boss fight with him will most likely be the worst boss ever made in the entire Resident Evil series. You have all sorts of problems with the mechanics. You have all sorts of problems with the story. You have very confused lore. You have all sorts of problems like that. I mean, I'm just expecting that with Resident Evil 5 Remilk, because it's just clear this team that handled Resident Evil 4 Remilk was so misinformed as to what Resident Evil 4 OG was like. And I imagine the same team will be handling Resident Evil 5 Remilk. It would not surprise me in the slightest. But that's just all I have to say about that, because I've talked about this point way too many times. But we're already in the final part right here where we have to get the rocket launcher to Leon. There is no point in even discussing the previous sections because they're very simple. And right now we're just going to get past this guy. When you get over to this spot, the crossbow guys tend to stop firing. And then I'm going to get this guy out of the way with the TMP. Then I need to destroy the explosive. I'm going to use the flash grenade to get past the shield guy. You can use the bow gun here as well, but I sold it just so I could afford the rocket launcher. And we have another flash grenade right over here, so we're going to be able to stun the rest of these enemies. And once we get up, the rest of this should be pretty simple. Even though it looks like I'm expressing a sense of urgency, it really doesn't feel like it. Because again, it just feels like a spammy flash fest. And then this part, you can just take your time however you need. Like, they give you so much time in this sequence, and it's normally a standard thing in Resident Evil to give you more time than necessary, but where is the sense of urgency, guys? Like, Resident Evil 4 OG with Separate Ways, when you were doing that final chase scene and actually getting the rocket launcher to Leon, the music, the scenario design, the environment, the enemies, everything felt like it was complementing a rush. Like, you had to rush very quickly in order to get to that rocket launcher before Leon is killed. And it didn't even have a time limit, but this right here, there is a time limit, but they give you so much time to do these sequences, and these enemies, you can easily get rid of them even when you don't have upgraded weaponry, but I'm just going to be using the flash grenades against them. I'm going to be stabbing them with the knife as well. Like, everything just feels like it's slowing you down, honestly. Like, even these tentacles, they feel like they slow you down, and then you have to take time shooting the Vista doors and the rest of these guys. Like, none of it complements a faster pace. I just don't understand what they were thinking here. There's no soul in this encounter. There's literally nothing here. It's the perfect personification for what this DLC is. A soulless slop. And everything is just so sluggish. Everything just feels so badly paced. Everything just doesn't complement a very fast and frenetic nature the Separate Ways. It's all so meaningless and throwaway in the end, just like with every other part in this DLC. This DLC should never have been released. It is a disgrace to the original Separate Ways DLC. But we get to the end here, and I've gotten the S plus rank. Oh, I feel so accomplished. Like, this doesn't change anything. I just got through it very fast. Like, nothing I did in this video changes my perspective on Separate Ways Remilk. This is still the worst Resident Evil DLC ever made. Regardless of my changes in methodologies, regardless of anything like that, nothing changes what this DLC is. This is a complete rip-off of a DLC, and that you have people flaunting their professional difficulty S plus status, like that's somehow going to make them better than me when it comes to calling this DLC amazing. What the hell are they talking about? They don't even understand what professional S plus even means in the context of this pre-alpha. What an absolute joke. But stay tuned for my future content. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.